Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and you know I'm excited to be here. But you know what else? I'm happy to be here. And there's a difference, right? Excitement is something that we feel, as a result of the enthusiasm, as I've told you about before, right? When we're enthusiastic about something and we're engaged in something, excitement will naturally arise from that, right? This feeling of like you got all this energy, and that's a beautiful thing, right? But happiness is something a little bit different. It's on a different level, right? And it's very pertinent to what we're going to talk about today is this idea of cultivation of our happiness, right? And that's the wonderful thing, right? Is that happiness is not some kind of fluke. Happiness does not rely on the stars and planets all aligning for you one day. Happiness does not rely on those things that you can get in your life or even the people in your life. Happiness is something that can be cultivated. It can be developed just like any other skill. And that's what we're going to talk about for the next couple of days here. I did a podcast a while ago that talked about the three levels of happiness, right? Because there's like a surface level of happiness, and then there's that's very unstable, very unsustainable, right? It's fickle. It changes with those things that we just talked about, right? You get a bad, into a bad traffic accident, right? That top level of happiness is the one that's going to flee and going to escape you during times where things are not going well for you, right? So that's a very fickle, unsustainable, shallow level of happiness, right? But we go a little deeper and we get into a more sustainable, more stable depth of happiness, right? Which is the ability to kind of get a sense of your place in the world and knowing that you're where you ought to be, right? In terms of your own goals, your own values, and that kind of thing, right? And that's a little deeper. But then there's even a deeper level, because even that second level, we can be disappointed by things. We can be disappointed by ourselves. We can be disappointed. Things can get thrown off, right? Like it's not necessarily within our control that we're on pace for our goals or that we feel our station in life, right? A company we work for goes out of business. We're out of work. All of a sudden, everything changes, right? So even that second level is not as solid, right? But if we go a little deeper, then that third level of happiness, that's the one that is completely stable, completely sustainable, is as solid as anything could possibly be, right? And that's the place where we start, getting a sense of engagement in something that's bigger than us. Right. And that's where we get into our life purpose and meaning in our life. Right. And once you get to that level of happiness, well, like I said, nothing can really shake you off of that. Right. So we're going to talk about these three over the next couple of days, the next 3 days, in fact, 3 topics, 3 days. But today, we're going to start with that first level. Right. Because it really does require for us to kind of cultivate each one of these levels in turn. Right. You can't kind of skip to the bottom one. Right. Because when you try to do that, if you're on that top level of happiness that I'm going to get to in a second, again, that's very fickle. And if you're not trying to cultivate that, well, then it's like trying to build a house on a foundation of sand, right? It's just not really going to work, right? It might work temporarily, and you might have flashes of happiness. Of course, we all have that, but basically at the bottom line, and ultimately, it's not going to work. It's going to fall apart on you, and you're going to find yourself dwelling in a place of unhappiness, right? So the top level of happiness is very, very simple, right? That's the one that's like, duh, kind of, right? Which is just, it's a matter of simply experiencing more positive emotions than negative emotions. It's that simple, right? But it's not that easy, right? So let's talk about what that means for a minute, okay? So first of all, when I say, and I know I give this disclaimer all the time, but it's really, really important, okay? I mean, it's vitally important that you understand this, okay? It's not ever, when we talk about cultivating positive emotions, right? It's not ever about avoiding or denying negative emotion. Before we even get there, let me back up just a little bit again, right? When I say positive and negative emotions, right? The connotation in most people's mind when I say this, right, is good emotions and bad emotions, right? Positive is good, negative is bad, right? That's how we tend to think of things in this world. However, when it comes to emotions specifically, okay, we're not talking about good emotions and bad emotions. When we say positive and negative in the context of emotions, we're talking about the attraction or the repulsion, right? And even that, like repulsion, that has a very negative connotation, that word, right? All that means is to have this kind of action, right? You come closer to me, I back up. I come closer to you, you back up, right? Just like a magnet, right? I like to call emotions just like little magnets, right? When you're a kid, you probably at some point in your life, you got two little magnets. And if you put them in one way, they, got them close enough to each other, they stuck together, right? But if you flipped one of them around or both of them around, I don't know. You flip one of them around or both of them around. You got it close, and then all of a sudden it was chasing each other, right? You could like chase the magnet around the whole table. Everywhere you went, the magnet was pushing away. That is what we mean by positive and negative emotions, right? It's like a polarity. So the positive emotions, right, are there. Your emotions are there to help you, right? Your emotions are there to help you to understand things, and also to motivate you towards the things that you want and love, which would be the positive attraction, right? Or they're there to get you to avoid the things that you're afraid of, which would be the negative attraction or the negative repulsion, right? So when I say positive and negative emotions, that's what I mean, okay? Which means that there's nothing bad about a negative emotion, right? In fact, negative emotions could be, seen as even more important to understand anyway than the positive emotions, right? Because the negative emotions are the ones that are keeping you protected, right? And that's the thing, right? When we feel like we're in danger of something, right? That's where our emotional motivation is there to help us to say, okay, yeah, this doesn't feel good. Get out of here, right? Like go away from this person who's making you feel this anxious, right? Or this anger or whatever it is, right? Don't go in that room that smells funny, right? Like there's something dangerous there, right? Like that's what our emotions are there for. And that's a very helpful thing, right? That's not something we want to, be upset about. Right? In fact, we should be grateful for those things, right? I mean, it's, again, at least as grateful for the negative emotions as we are for the positive emotions, right? That's really the bottom line with that, okay? So now, disclaimer number 2. Okay, we got to be very careful. And I said this a minute ago, and I say it all the time. Whenever I get into these positive and negative emotions, when we're talking about cultivating positive emotions, it's very, very important. And I mean very, very important, like life or death kind of importance, right? Because it will make you sick, right? If you're not able to process your negative emotions, specifically emotions like anger, right? If you're not able to process those and give that emotion a place to live and to kind of go through its thing so that you can understand it, well then you're putting yourself at great health risk. I'm not even just kidding about that. That's absolutely true. Dr. Gabor Mate wrote a whole book about people that he talked to in the palliative care ward, right? Which is, we call it here in America, we call it hospice, right? And that's just basically when you're so sick that there's nothing medicine can do for you except to keep you comfortable. And they just make you comfortable for the last weeks of your life, basically, and that's it, right? So Dr. Mate was interviewing people and wrote a whole book based on people's stories that he heard in that palliative care ward, right? And almost all of them, as they lay there in the final chapter of their life, almost all of them told stories of the inability to process and to express and to understand and allow themselves to be with their emotions of anger specifically. Right. So I'm not even exaggerating when I say that it's life or death. Okay. It's really, really important. So that said, it's also, I wanted to share with you a little personal story. It just happened yesterday, actually. It's really kind of amazing. That really talks to this concept of feeling negative emotions and allowing for negative emotions to happen, right? So I had my personal coaching call yesterday. I work with a coach. This is the best thing I've ever done for myself, and actually, I've pretty much continually worked with one coach or another for the last 3 years, and it is something that is amazing, right? Like there's just something really amazing about having someone, kind of in your corner, somebody who's making space for you and helping you through a specific thing or generalized thing, whatever it is that you need to work on. But to have someone who has that same goal in mind and in their heart, right, and is there to support you for it, right? Like that's their only responsibility in this situation, right? It's amazing, and I again, I experience it from both sides, right? I experience from coaching people, and I see how much benefit people get from having someone like me. And mostly what I'm doing, and mostly what my coach does, is actually reflects what I'm doing right, and I reflect what my clients are doing right. It's not about saying like, "Oh, you really screwed up this week. You got to do better." I've never said anything like that to a client, and I wouldn't want to either. It's more, and just like me on the receiving end, it's mostly about understanding that, yeah, you know what, you're doing better than you think you are, and so here's why, and here's what you can cultivate to keep doing better. Right. And week by week, you have somebody who goes through that process with you. Well, my friends, there's some power in that. I'm telling you, there is some true power in that. And so yesterday in my coaching session, right, I don't know where it came from. I was feeling pretty good in the morning. I mean, I'm busy. I've got all kinds of stuff going on. I've got, just like anyone else, I feel, fear. I feel anxiety. I feel worry. I feel all that all the time. I manage it, and I manage it well because I practice at it a lot, but it doesn't mean that I don't feel it. Right. And that's another part of this, concept here, is that there's never a point where you just stop feeling negative emotions. That just doesn't happen. And it shouldn't, because if that happens, that means that there's probably something really wrong and you should get to the hospital, right? Because it's a natural thing for us to feel these things. And again, so anyway, back to my personal story. Yesterday, for whatever reason, we started talking. We were talking about shadow work, right? And shadow work is like the area of your psyche, for lack of a better term, right? But your spiritual side, your psyche, your mental state, or whatever you want to call it, right? If there's things within your psyche that you have not integrated, right, into your consciousness, right, then that's what we call the shadow, right? It's a term that comes from Carl Jung, psychology, right? It's not a bad thing, and it's not something that's evil or something like that. But what it is it's a dark thing because it's not integrated into your consciousness. And what happens is, until we integrate it into your consciousness, Carl Jung has a great quote that my coach butchered yesterday. I'm going to butcher it for you today. It says something about, until we integrate the shadow into the light of our consciousness, well, we're going to keep, it's going to keep kind of impacting our life, and we'll call it fate. Right? Like that's where we kind of say, well, just the way things go for me, right? That's actually the lack of integration in your shadow, right? And we'll talk more about that another time. That's a big subject. That's going to take a couple of episodes alone. But yesterday, my coach and I were working on some shadow work, right? And it was almost like the minute she mentioned the word shadow, like my shadow said, up, it's my time. We're coming through. And my friends, I spent, I want to say, at least 30, if not 45 minutes just bawling. And I'm talking about crying. I went through half a box of Kleenex on my desk. I was crying like I haven't cried in years. I mean, I can't remember the last time I cried like this, right? And it was just like pouring out of me, right? And I had no idea how much of that was in me waiting to get out, right? And I want to tell you something, my friends, that, and especially for all you guys out there, there's something about it, right? And I don't buy into all this sexist stuff. And I really try to be, enlightened beyond that, but it's true in our society that as men, we're taught not to let ourselves get to that point, right? It's just for whatever reason, for better or worse, that's how it is, right? And and it's important though, friends. It's really important for you, especially you guys out there, but girls too. I mean, it's everyone, right? We need to be able to let it out. We need to be able to process it. And if we can't, then it just builds up. It never goes away. Right. And that's the thing, right? I say it'd been years since I had cried like that. Right. And that's the thing. Like, my body is not trained to cry. I have this conversation with my wife all the time. Like, she will cry like that, And I've often told her, like, I wish I could cry like you do. It seems like a really great way to just let it out, but my body doesn't do it. My body moves towards something like anger instead, which is really not good. But again, it's allowing it to process, right? And allowing it to be there as I regulate it, right? Not saying, oh, no, you can't get angry. Oh, no, you can't cry. You got to let these things out. Right. And so, my friends, when I cried yesterday, I swear that's the best I felt in a long, long, long time. I felt it was like I felt exhausted, but like in a really, really awesome way. Right. My head had this weird, like, almost like comfortably numb, like the old Pink Floyd song. I don't think they were talking about the same thing, but for me, it really worked. And it was amazing. And then last night, I slept like a baby. It was, what? I woke up this morning and what the first thing that came to my mind was the scene from the movie Fight Club, right? Where the guy couldn't sleep. He went to the doctor, asked for Valium. The doctor says, no, just sleep. You can do it. And the guy was just frustrated. He had insomnia for days. Remember, everything was like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, right? And then finally he goes to this support group where he starts crying and he lets it all out. And then they cut quick to another scene and he's just snoring in his bed, like sleeping, like the sleeping the sleep of the innocent, as they say. That's how I slept last night, and it was amazing. So the reason, I'm not sure why I was telling you this story, but well, I do know, of course. The reason I'm telling you this story is because I wanted to illustrate to you how vital it is to allow yourself to be in touch with those negative emotions, right? But at the same time, it's also very important to cultivate positive emotions. Okay, now that seems like dissonance there, right? That seems contradictory. So let me explain what I mean. We don't want to deny the negative emotions that we have, right? When they arise, honor them. When they arise, allow them in, right? Allow your anger, allow your crying, allow your shame or your grief. I just talked to somebody last night whose family member lost a really dear friend of theirs, right? Of hers, right? And she's feeling really guilty that she never got a chance to spend time with her before she passed. And it was really, very, I know those feelings. There's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of regret, there's a lot of shame, right? And what I told, and there's grief, right? There's tremendous grief, right? And what I was telling my clients is that, in our society, we've gotten to this point where it's like, oh, just get back to life, move on with your life. It's going to be all right. Just get through it, right? In days of old, like 100 years ago, you think about like, women in Italy who would, wear black for like a month or 6 months or whatever after somebody died. They were in mourning. Right? They were announcing to the whole world that this is what I'm doing. I lost somebody and I am in mourning. So don't expect anything different from me. Right? But here in our world, for whatever reason, it's like, no. You got to get back to work. Just stuff it away somehow. Just get over it. Get back to work. Get back to your life. She wouldn't have wanted you to be sad anyway, right? That's what we tell ourselves. Well, the problem is that those emotions don't go anywhere. They don't go away. And then one day, 6 months from now, you'll be standing, online at the supermarket or something, and all of a sudden you'll just lose it and you'll just start bawling, crying, right? And it's going to come at one of those really inconvenient times, right? But it's going to happen. It's going to happen one way or the other because it doesn't just go away. All you've done is you've pushed it down the road a little bit, but it's still coming, right? And so while it's very important to when these negative emotions arise, it's very important to honor them and to allow them to spend time with them. So if you're in grieving, if you've lost somebody, take a couple of days, even if you can call in sick to work, call in sick if you can. Lie around in your bed for 2 days and just cry and just feel it, right? Just allow yourself to process it, right? But then in moment to moment times where things aren't sad and nobody is passing away, well, in those times, it's very possible for us to cultivate positive emotions because while it's important to experience and to honor the negative emotions as they come, a lot of times when there's sort of we have the option to go positive or negative. By default we wind up going negative because, again, just like everything else that I talk about here, it is a habit, right? It is what you do. You do it because it's what you've done every single time and you've practiced it, right? And you've practiced it, and practice makes permanent, right? And so therefore you have developed this habit, right? That when this happens, you experience this emotion, right? When you get stuck in traffic, you experience anger. When somebody at Starbucks pours your latte not exactly the way you want it, you experience anger, right? Or maybe it's sadness. Maybe you start crying because, like the old Jerry Seinfeld thing where the girl dropped the hot dog and she started crying about it, right? Like, that's your habit. That's what you've practiced, right? And we can all see these patterns, right? And so those patterns, it's not necessary to cry because a hot dog dropped, right? but the thing is, right, that we can cultivate even while we acknowledge that brief feeling of wow, my hot dog fell and I feel like I could cry right now. Again, if it feels like you need to cry, let yourself cry, right? But on a moment to moment basis, when the hot dogs aren't falling and the traffic jam isn't happening and we're just kind of moving our way through our lives, well, in those times, we can cultivate positive emotions, right? And we can do it through the same kind of practice that with which we've cultivated negative emotions, right? And it's very, very simple, right? So there are practices. I'm not going to have much time today to go into the actual practices, right? But there are practices like gratitude practice, compassion practice. There's journaling that will help with this. There's a lot of different practices, and if you're interested in cultivating and or performing any of these practices to cultivate your sense of that first level of happiness, right? Because that's what this is, right? Remember, that first level of happiness is simply experiencing more positive emotions than negative emotions, right? But now this gets us into another tricky place, right? Because you've heard the term probably toxic positivity, and that really applies to what we're talking about here, right? It's not about saying I'm just going to be happy no matter what's happening, right? That's toxic positivity. And that's just the same thing as denying your grief in the face of somebody passing away, right? Eventually, it's going to come back and it's going to hurt when it does, right? It's going to be very inconvenient and likely very painful. So the idea then is not to cultivate the positive emotions to the extent that we're denying the negative emotions, but instead kind of think about it. If there's a vacuum, the thing that can fill that vacuum is the positive emotions, right? So and because that's kind of the way it is, right? Like when we have a choice of where we want to be with this thing. Do we want to be in a positive place or do we want to be in a negative place? We have the choice in a lot of circumstances, right? And so again, not to get to a point of toxic positivity, right, where we deny any existence of negative emotions, right? Like you don't want to do that. But what you can do is on a daily basis, you can cultivate purposely gratitude, compassion, kindness towards others, forgiveness, right? These are things that you can cultivate with very simple practices that only take a few minutes a day, right? You're not talking about, I'm not saying, okay, you got to shave your head and move into this monastery and live here for 4 years and then you'll be okay. No, 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 no. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just very simple practices every day that give you the power to cultivate more positive emotions than negative emotions. Right? Because you do have the power to do this, right? It is within your control to a certain extent. But now again, it becomes like when the flat tire happens, right? Or when the traffic jam happens, or when the person screws up your coffee order at Starbucks, it's not about saying, oh, well, I'll just be happy anyway and la, 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 la. I'll just not go to work today. It'll be okay. No, 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 right? It's about when that thing happens, like, darn it, my flat tire, today of all days, really? All right, let me get down and fix it. Like I felt that. I felt the anger. I felt the frustration. I felt whatever that emotion was. But now let me just get to fix it. Right? And I might still feel that anger for a while. I mean, I might still feel annoyed, whatever. But because I've practiced so much positive emotions, that it's never going to be that far away. It's going to be within my reach to transform the anger that I'm feeling. And to, so in my case, something like this might happen where, okay, I'm fixing the tire and you know what? Now I can feel a little gratitude. I feel gratitude for this situation because it allowed me to get in touch with my negative emotions. And it's been a while since I felt a negative emotion. So thank you. Right? And now all of a sudden, I'm smiling again and I'm happy again. And so that's the first level of happiness. Okay. If you want to learn about some of the practices to get yourself into the cultivation of this, okay, hit me up. All right. I'll put the link to book a free consultation with me in the description, as I always do. And I look forward to talking to you because this is the most simple and easy way to start to cultivate your happiness. Now, tomorrow we're going to get into that second level, which gets a little, each level gets a little more, it requires a little bit more effort on our part. So let's think about this for today. Okay. And think about, maybe sit down at some point and kind of, consider how many times, like a lot of times when I start with a brand new client, for the first week, I just have them try to notice all the different times that you feel a negative emotion, like anger or sadness or fear or grief or shame. Notice them. And if you can, jot them down in a little notebook if you can. And then look back on it and realize, like, wow, I wrote down 45 different times that I felt negative emotions last week. I only wrote down 3 positive emotions. Yikes. Let's get to work, right? That's the kind of concept. And this is exactly how we're going to start my new program called How to Be Happy for No Reason. So if you're into this, if it feels good, consider signing up for that, right? And if you want to know more about that, you can just hit me up on that link. It's a calendar link, so you just find a time and a day that's highlighted that works for you. Click on it, put in your name, your email address, blah blah blah, all set, and I will call you at the time and day that it's designated. All right, and if you're interested, that course starts in about 2 weeks from now. So I'd love to have you in there. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I'll be back again tomorrow to talk about that second level of happiness, and it's going to be exciting. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.